Obrigado por virem, obrigado pela presença. É um prazer tê-los aqui, imagina, nosso prazer. Vou falar um pouquinho sobre o Ben, claro, porque falar sobre si mesmo é sempre um pouco desconfortável, então eu falo sobre o Ben no início para apresentá-lo a vocês. Fazer um pequeno resumo da história, do currículo do Ben. Bom, tudo começa há mais ou menos na década de 60, em 63, exatamente, quando o Ben ganhou uma bolsa de estudos, foi o mais jovem a receber essa bolsa de estudos da Vintners Company. Essa bolsa de estudos deu ao Ben o direito de passar 6 meses nos vinhedos europeus, estudando esses vinhedos, provando vinhos, enfim, conhecendo melhor os vinhos e os vinhedos daquelas regiões clássicas da Europa. Portanto, já são aí quase 50 anos dedicados ao mundo do vinho. E nesses 50 anos o Ben foi diretor da Croft, das operações de vinho do Porto e das operações de Jerez, foi diretor da Taylor's Flatgate, uma das mais famosas casas de vinho do Porto do mundo. Isso é um parênteses interessante, o Ben também é um grande especialista em vinhos do Porto, além de ser produtor de vinhos de Tokai. Foi consultor da Moët Hennessy, foi consultor da Laurent Perrier, casas de champanhe, é consultor até hoje de um ramo da família Rothschild, que mora na Inglaterra, o Lord Rothschild, que é um dos sócios da Royal Tokai Wine Company, professor da WSET, da escola, né, o Wine and Spirits Education Trust, foi professor por muito tempo, dava aula sobre vinho do Porto, é membro da confraria do vinho do Porto, ele é um chevalier do Tastevan também. Que mais que a gente pode falar sobre ele? Escreveu 2 livros sobre vinho do Porto. O mais recente foi publicado ano passado. What is the name of your last book about port wine?
Real Men Drink Port.
Real Men Drink Port.
And ladies do too. That really shows that I'm very old. But equally, I think that the Royal Tokai project has been one of the most exciting that I've been involved in, because for years in corporate life, in a large company, everything is formalized, and then I had a chance with Hugh Jhonson to really be at the beginning of something which historically is so important in the wine world. And the Tokai region was so neglected, was so under-fulfilling its expectations, that we got together in 1990 and started this business. It's difficult to know where to start. I'll just list various things, and then please ask any questions as we go along. I suppose the first thing is that the wines of Tokai in the 17th and 18th century were the most well-known wines in Europe. They were the most expensive wines. They were drunk by the kings and the emperors and the tsars and the popes. So the image of Tokai was as high as you could get then. So that's one reason. Secondly is that I always like a challenge, and it was a challenge. My experience of port and the Douro and port production helped me enormously when we started the company, because there were similar problems. Bureaucracy, a region that was far away from a main town, because we were 3.5 hours from Budapest. Now it's 2 hours with the new roads. We had we had 6 general managers in 6 years, because they didn't really understand what we wanted to do. The language was almost impossible. The only word I know is egishegi, which means cheers or bravo or salute, and it's written down there now, which is fantastic. So the language was a huge problem. You then had this bureaucratic viewpoint that the wines being produced in the 50s, 60s, 70s and 80s were wonderful wines. So the tasting panel didn't understand when we submitted our first wines that had been made by pruning correctly, cutting back the volumes per hectare, not over-oxidizing, filling the barrels up, all these normal things. And they rejected them. And so we weren't allowed to export. So there were all these things at the beginning. But gradually we got organized and we started exporting. And I had the fun of actually going around with my contacts and saying, this is my new venture that I've got. Where's the bottle here? This is our bottle I've got. We didn't have a label then. We just had a bottle of wine. And so we had to create the pricing structure, an export pricing structure. So I looked at Sauternes, I looked at, there's only one person selling Tokai in England, that was Berry Brothers. I looked at the price they had there, and so that's how we started. And this label is taken, in fact, from a 1901 vintage that we discovered in the museum in Budapest. Because there's somebody sitting there.
Ben, you know who was the first? What was the first company to bottle the Tokai Azul in history? The first company.
The first company in history, going back. I don't know.
No, nobody knows this.
Nobody knows this because all the first of all that all the names of all the records of all the producers just don't exist. So when we started the company, I thought, well, if I start a port company like Johnny Graham started Churchill's, I would, as a reference point, I would get some old vintages, old tawnies, and then correlate what I do with that. So we looked at the old Tokai wines, and they weren't really that good. There was some, I mean, the biggest collection is with the Bord Combinat, and they just keep it like that. And that was all bottled by them. So we don't know. There were very few bottles that Hugh Blind had bought some bottles. Peter Morel in New York bought some bottles. A few bottles came out of the Christie's sales, but virtually I think there are no more old bottles of Tokai around now.
Okay.
So all the names that you get now, like Royal Tokai, were Royal Tokai, and then you get the others. Hetzel is named after the vineyard, Dishnoko is named after the vineyard, Pajos is named after the vineyard, Neg is named after the vineyard. So it's a completely new name. So we couldn't go back in history and say, oh, we couldn't resonate with a name that had been going for 200 years.
Okay, thank you.
So, shall we taste the wine?